Hello, everyone. Today is the 5th podcast of Texas Blockchain. And today I have Chris Georgian. Nice to meet you, Chris. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Great to be here. Pleasure to be your 5th guest. I'm guessing that's what this is.
Definitely. Chris is actually the founder and managing director of Topl.
Yeah.
Topl is an emerging layer 2 Bitcoin protocol, right?
Yep, you got it.
Yeah, and we're gonna have ask him a few questions, and we're just gonna have a great time today. So if you want to go ahead and get started, give just a small introduction to Topl, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, a little bit about me. I've been in Web3 personally as a hobbyist since about 2012, 2013. Fell down that rabbit hole actually when I was in university over at Rice in Houston. And I got into it professionally with my first startup in 2015. Okay. Started Topl then about 2018, so we've been going about 5 years now. And Topl really sits at that intersection of Web3 and sustainability, Web3 and social good, looking to use blockchain technology to help climate resiliency or help low-income regions of the world. And we're doing all of that now as a Bitcoin layer 2. So our own Web3 protocol, specifically for these social good builders.
Awesome. Yeah, and before we continue on, my name is Manav. I'm one of the members of Texas Incubator and Texas Blockchain, and a future co-head for Texas Incubator next semester.
Awesome. So
looking forward to that. So I just want to ask, start with the introduction. How did you get, the idea of Topl? You said back in 2015, correct?
So 2015 was actually a previous startup that I founded, did that for a couple years. So I was just lucky enough to be active in the space early on. I was drifting in that social good direction, and I was lucky enough to be part of a few working groups, a few conversations with the World Bank and other development banks that were looking really early on, 2016, 2017, about using blockchain technology to help clean up supply chains or help improve transparency around carbon markets, things like that. And the question was always posed to me as the blockchain expert in the room, is blockchain technology a good, a good tech, a good tool for this problem? My answer was yes. Follow-up question was, well, then which blockchain do we use? And that was the piece I never had an answer to. And that was why we created Topl, really to just have a dedicated protocol for these emerging market use cases, for these social good use cases. And then about a year and a half, 2 years later, Topl got started, and we've been going ever since.
Awesome. Yeah. So before you started Topl, you said that you had a previous startup,
yeah.
Right? What was that about?
So that was more on the fintech side of things, actually. We were a private fork of the Ethereum network, and we were doing mobile payments, location-based marketing, loyalty rewards for small businesses, food trucks, coffee shops, things like that. All on the Ethereum side of things. So I've seen EVM land, I've seen the Ethereum space. Topl, actually initially we were our own layer 1 before making a strategy adjustment to connect ourselves with the Bitcoin ecosystem and kind of just get access to that network, those on-ramps, off-ramps, liquidity, everything like that. So Ethereum land, our own layer 1, and now into the Bitcoin universe.
Awesome. And I think a lot of people, our listeners, might have questions. What made you move on from your own layer 1 into the Bitcoin land, right?
Yeah. So it's actually kind of really interesting. Whenever you're building a startup, you always think you have ideas, and then the market actually tells you what your ideas should be. And the biggest piece of feedback we got from the 60, 70 projects that we have working with us is, we're worried about being isolated. We're worried about being on an island. We want interoperability. We want to be, part of a bigger ecosystem. They love what we're doing. They love our focus on kind of their types of problems. But they wanted to be part of something bigger. And so that really just leaves you a couple chains to link up with, probably Ethereum and Bitcoin. Maybe there's some others in there as well. But given the fact that we have such a focus on the global south, on emerging markets, we really looked at what crypto assets are most understood there, what crypto assets people have access to, have heard of, are willing to use, and still by and away Bitcoin is has that place in terms of what most people have heard about, what most people hold, and everything like that. So that's what took us in the Bitcoin direction.
Awesome. So in the Topl network, what big projects do you guys support, and what do those projects do, if you can just go into them?
Yeah, absolutely. So the earliest projects that Topl actually ever did is we did a lot of supply chain work. This idea that you can use blockchain technology to clean up supply chains and to make all of that data in supply chains immutable. We did a lot of work, we've done work in the diamond space, we've done work with gold, we've done work with like sustainably sourced timber, all to this idea that you can use that traceability and that transparency to differentiate your products, you know, to get better positioning in the marketing, to get premiums on your products, everything like that. And also supply chains have like this great, like from a startup perspective, a great bootstrapping mechanism. If we think about DeFi, if we think about a lot of blockchain applications, they're marketplaces. I need buyers, I need sellers. I can't get sellers until I have buyers, I can't get buyers until I have sellers. Supply chains are great because you can onboard one customer at a time. You can do it one at a time and kind of grow that way. So we've done a lot of supply chain work. We also then do a fair amount of work in the refi space, in the carbon credit space, specifically with what are called nature-based carbon credits. So carbon credits that, you know, we've probably all heard of can have different sources. They can come from different forms of capturing carbon, sucking carbon out of the atmosphere. We work in particular with a lot of nature-based projects, actually a lot of nature-based projects here in Texas, either along like the Gulf Coast or with ranch land and farmland, that they're using more sustainable practices, and those sustainable practices actually help their soil to suck more carbon out of the atmosphere. So we do a lot of projects on that side as well, and those are probably the two most active areas for us.
Awesome. And you know, one thing I did realize when you were mentioning, you know, the nature space and then the supply chain state, a lot of blockchain projects, you know, or a lot of other companies in the space, or out of the space, tend to look down upon blockchain technologies, and especially something traditional as like, you know, the nature area or the supply chain area. How are you able to overcome, you know, those obstacles that probably came through your way, and how did you convince people to, you know, start getting those customers and start getting
So the blockchain space is interesting. There are certain contingents of the space that are like very loud, very much in the news, and so often when people hear about blockchain just as a technology, our mind immediately goes to like crypto and trading and everything like that. And that's super important, that has a role to play, but probably the biggest thing that we have to do, and we have a lot of success with it, is we sit people down and we just tease out that separation of, just because you're on a blockchain doesn't mean it's a cryptocurrency, or just because you're using this technology doesn't mean that, all right, you know, the next step is for you to try to list something on Coinbase. Like, those are completely separate things. And we just, you know, we've had a lot of success making sure that people are educated and understand that distinction. And that distinction really takes people a long way, I'd say.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's one of the biggest obstacles that many companies or many blockchain companies have to overcome, because you know, people in the traditional, like, you know, finance area, supply chain area, they probably still look down upon blockchain technologies, you know, and that's one of the biggest issues that probably all blockchain like companies break crypto.
Much less so though than when I started. The space has come a long way in terms of just like being less scary. We were super scary and super confusing in 2014, 2015. People had no idea what to make of it. So yes, still a challenge. Much easier than it was with my first company.
Definitely. I just wanted to ask, what are your future goals for Topl? Where do you see Topl becoming or being in the next 5 years?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for us, and actually one of the big motivations for us integrating with Bitcoin, is we've always had a lot of plans for financial inclusion applications, you know, working with some projects that are focused on the unbanked and things like that. But we were always stymied really by the lack of like on-ramps and off-ramps that a new chain would have. So by integrating ourselves with Bitcoin, we're tapping into, again, all those on-ramps, off-ramps, partners, things like that. And so really expanding from just supply chain and carbon where we are now to a lot of these financial inclusion, unbanked applications that we've had on our radar for a while. We just haven't had, you know, the path to get there, I would say. Topl will actually be going through a pretty big transition early next year. Everything we've done to date, and it's made it a much easier sell for a lot of the supply chain and more traditional customers, we've been a private blockchain.
Correct.
So it's just been, you know, no token, no public staking, no community, just a private blockchain. We'll be transitioning next year to being a full publicly launched mainnet, which will hopefully unlock those new verticals, but will come with definite challenges about not scaring away existing users and things like that. But that's a big transition for us for early next year.
Definitely. Good luck on that.
Thank you.
That's going to be, you need a lot of congratulations for that. And a lot
Appreciate
of good luck.
that.
But what incentives are you going to be bringing, builders onto your blockchain? What type of incentives will you be providing to them?
Yeah. So we are, we're going through really all of that right now. Probably in the next month or so, we'll be launching bug bounties for developers, and we'll have incentivized testnets going as well. But we're also really trying to, play with the rest of the Bitcoin ecosystem. We have some ideas right now around Topl themed ordinals or Topl themed Satoshis, things like that, kind of trying to play on that larger ecosystem we're trying to be a part of, and really, looking to tap into that, because I think a lot of this space is about knowing where you are in the landscape, and us going the Bitcoin direction means that we really want to be up on and incentivizing the things that the Bitcoin community is already most excited about, whether that's BitVM or whether that's kind of ordinals a couple months ago, whatever that may be, know your ecosystem.
Definitely. You mentioned ordinals. What's your take on that? A couple months back, that was very popping, it was very popular back then. So
I remember all the way back when people were experimenting with these ideas of colored coins. Basically that you would be able to tag, individual UTXOs, individual output boxes on Bitcoin, and you can then differentiate Bitcoins, and you could use that extra metadata. In a lot of ways, ordinals builds on that, and to me it's really great to see that coming back, because for so long the only way people have thought about smart contracts or extra data on a blockchain has been through the EVM lens. I think so many people in this space don't even differentiate the general idea of a smart contract and a Solidity smart contract. For so many people, it's one and the same.
Correct.
So if anything, it's just great to see different ways of designing these things, different ways of experimentation. And the technology is still so early. We need a lot more experimentation. I think ordinals is probably something that we can see moving into production, whereas other experiments in the Bitcoin space, like BRC20, which is just Bitcoin's or a reimagination of the ERC20 fungible standard on Ethereum over to Bitcoin, that's much more of a prototype that needs a lot more work. But ordinals, I think, will be ready for the next whenever the next NFT bull run is.
The next NFT bull run.
Yeah.
Definitely. You did mention we're pretty early,
Yes.
And you've been even earlier than that, back in 2014, 2015, and I'm sure you've been through many bull cycles, bull runs, and now since we're in a bear market, what's your thoughts on the next 5-10 years? What do you think we're going to end up being as a space in general?
So there's, I think, a big debate right now around, a lot of people say that as blockchain technology matures, it will disappear into the background, meaning that you'll be using a blockchain application and you won't even know it. That's definitely the majority take, and I think that's interesting because it follows like most other technologies, right? You don't ever think about what's under the hood of the technologies you're using. I think blockchain's a bit different though. Blockchain was born out of this idea of self-sovereignty of data, of us not being monetized anymore as consumers, about these ideas of credible networks. So yes, we have a long way to go on the UI front, the UX front. We need to make it much more accessible, much easier for people to use.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there's work for us all in the space to be doing around creating awareness, not on this token or that DeFi strategy or anything like that, but going back to our roots of this is why the technology was created in the first place. We're all taught in the startup space that the person paying is your customer, and if you, conversely, are not paying, you are not a customer, meaning of Google, of Facebook, of any, or Meta, whatever we're calling it now,
right.
Any of those platforms, we're not customers of those platforms, we're products of those platforms. And yeah, I just think there's a lot of education and evangelization that we need to do in the blockchain space to help people understand that as we try to break out of our bubble and reach mass adoption.
No, definitely, and I think my take on that, mass adoption, it will definitely take some time.
Yeah.
it will take a lot more resources from everyone, a lot more support from the community. Right now, I do feel like tokens, like kind of trading those small coins and stuff is what the space is kind of revolving over, and that's what the outside, like the public, knows about, right? They don't know about networks like Topl or like the blockchain technology, what the purpose is of what we're trying to do, right? They're thinking of just coins and NFTs and how to make money. So that definitely has to change within the next couple of years. And that's also what Texas Blockchain is trying to help with. Trying to educate students, trying to educate people in Austin. Along with, like yesterday, we had an event with ATX DAO. And we're just trying to spread the awareness, trying to show other people what the crypto space and Web3 space is about.
I think Austin in particular, I think, is a really powerful crypto space in terms of thinking through how crypto and blockchain can break out of its bubble. So I've been a part of ATX DAO for a little bit now, and like a lot of the work that the group does around like trying to support local artists and things like that is, I think, has so much potential because it uses the ideas of NFTs, of digital art, but it takes that concept and then applies it to like real art that people would otherwise be interested in. I mean, we can do that on the tokenization side, like people are thinking through real estate, or people are thinking through like real assets and how we can tokenize those things that are valuable, tokenize them, democratize them, make them better on the blockchain, as opposed to just like inventing, new meme coins and things like that. We don't need more meme coins, but we do need to democratize access to like alternative investments and things like that.
Definitely, and I think Austin's a great place for all this. I'm from Houston, so Houston has pretty much nothing there in terms of crypto, Web3 in general. So I think a lot of cities, and Houston's the fourth largest city, and it has pretty much no blockchain prevalence over there. No one knows even what crypto is half the time over there. So I think a lot of big cities, especially like Houston, need to get more educated. People need to understand more things, and big events like I know Consensus and everything's being held in Austin, but bigger events should be held in Houston or Dallas, big cities like that.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think there's always this question of like where you start in different cities, and like some of the earliest signs we see on the Houston side is like Houston has a big port, so there are like some supply chain and logistics conversations there where people are looking at, hey, Houston has a lot of energy, we need to decarbonize that energy, can carbon credits be used in that? So we definitely have to take like the least scary use cases. We don't go to Houston and talk about NFTs or tokens. We're like, you can use blockchain as a better database, and we start there and we build on that.
Exactly, and I think that's the only way to kind of attract people's attention rather than through NFTs and crypto and these meme coins, definitely. So going back to Topl, how many people do you have working at Topl right now, and how's you created 2 startups, so how's the whole process? If our listeners want to know how the journey of a startup founder is, it's definitely challenging, tough.
Always has its ups and downs. So Topl's about 25, 26 people right now. So I think we're a really strong team. We're a really dedicated team. I'd say one of the most powerful things when you're building a team is finding people who care about the mission, who understand the vision, and who really do feel, like part owners, and really kind of feel a sense of ownership and identity with what you're building. That's important. It'll get you through those tough times, and those tough times are inevitable for startups, but conversely, good times are also inevitable. So for everyone who came into the crypto space, in 2021, 2022, and it feels like everything fell apart and fell off a cliff, we've been there before. We've had much bigger blow-ups than this. Everyone talks about how big FTX was. Right. My first startup, we were just getting going when Mt. Gox collapsed. For anyone who doesn't know, to put a bit of scale on it, at its peak, Mt. Gox was more than 85%, almost 90% of all Bitcoin trading volume. And that just disappeared on us basically overnight. And we came back. So you just kind of have to never forget that when things are good, eventually things are going to get bad for a bit. And then also remember, when things are bad, don't worry, they are going to get good again.
Definitely. Mt. Gox was 2016, right? Or 2017, I believe?
Might have even been, I think it was even earlier.
Really? I don't remember.
It was a long, in crypto years, it was forever ago. Yeah, whatever that was.
Definitely. But another thing I wanted to touch upon is you mentioned being a startup founder is a lot of work, tough and challenging. what are some advice you can give to our listeners? And a lot of our listeners are Texas blockchain members, right? So we're university students. How can we go about creating our own Web3 startup? And what are some tips and tricks as a new founder in university? Because you did create your first one in uni, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
So regardless of what the technology is, and especially I think the temptation's strongest when it's an exciting technology or one that like you're personally really bought into, is just you got to do the customer research. You got to go out there and really fall in love with the problem. It's off quoted for a reason, but you have to go out, try to think of the problem you're solving, go out, validate that, and be open to the idea that maybe it's not a problem for that many people, or maybe it is a problem, but maybe blockchain isn't the best solution for it. Or maybe blockchain's only a small part of it, and maybe it's a small part that is going to come much later. So, I'll kind of share a lesson from my first project. We were using two big technologies at the time, blockchain technology, and then it was actually around the time that low energy Bluetooth came out for the first time. So it was only then that you could kind of like keep Bluetooth on in the background on your phone and not drain your battery.
Right.
Before that, it would drain your battery. Everyone always had it off. And our use of Bluetooth for all our location-based services and kind of how we used it for mobile payments was the much, much more important part, and that's what everyone cared about. Honestly, for the first 2 years of that company, we probably shouldn't have worried about the blockchain side of things at all. We were running everything internally. It was a private network. We were super excited about blockchain. I was super excited about blockchain, but it wasn't what any of our customers cared about. So that was probably like some lost engineering time that, because I loved blockchain so much, I had blinders on. I was a bit blind to. That wasn't what the market needed. They needed this other really cool thing that we were developing, and just being open to that, I think, is important.
No, definitely. And I think trying to find problems for for startup founders, trying to figure out a problem that is really prevalent in the space is one of the hardest things.
Yes.
Right? What is a big gap within the community right now? What does the community really need is what a lot of university students probably face, right?
Yeah.
Because they're trying to figure out what to do. So what's your take on that? Like, how should we look out or try to find a problem? Or should we not even find one, just, into our day-to-day, figure out what issues that we're facing in the Web3 space?
Well, I really like the way you framed that. I'm going to challenge the way you framed it. I don't think of it as problems in the community, because the community is never as big as those of us who are in it believe it is. We might see a problem in Web3 and we're like, oh my God, everyone has this problem. When in reality, it's a relatively small community of DeFi people or anything like that. I try to, whenever I'm looking for problems, I always try to get out of whatever community I'm in, try to find those problems and say, are the learnings from my community potentially going to provide a solution for that? So, thinking of areas outside of Web3 and really thinking of how can my application or how can my solution be someone's first touch point with blockchain? Because if you're really thinking for the ideas that I think would be the biggest, have the most potential, they're going to be the ones that are oftentimes people's first experience in the space. Coinbase is as big as it is, for example, because it was everyone's first exchange, or it was so many people's first exchange.
Yeah.
It was kind of, that technology getting out of its bubble, as opposed to a lot of the smaller solutions that we see are like, oh, I'm a MetaMask user and I have this problem, someone's going to build a solution for that. There are definitely problems that need to be solved there, but they're probably going to be the ones that are maybe smaller and won't necessarily take us as far to mass adoption.
Definitely. There's a lot of, I do feel that there's a lot of issues that could be brought out without the Web3 space, and then bring it within our blockchain technology and figure out how to integrate everything. But we could talk about it for hours and hours.
Without a doubt.
100%. I do want to thank everyone for listening today. Thank you, Chris, for coming out today, chatting with us. Had a great time. And thank you for having our 5th podcast. Yep.